Hi, I am Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. Good morning, and I hope you are enjoying the new podcasts that I created, which, again, if you haven't heard of them, one of them is called Shiro, Be Your Own Hero, and that one was about heroism and inspiring yourself to be your own hero in your life instead of trying to look for others to be your hero or mentors. And then the second one is called Think Out for Your Imagination, and that one is about the imagination I had when I was growing up and how I imagined that I could fold up my house into pocket size and take it with me wherever I wanted. And then the next one is Chats, Barks, and Growls, Combos with Your Pet. That one is probably the most fun one because I get to do my voice. And I get to do Truffle's voice. And just, you know, tell you what I think dogs think throughout the day and what they think about their owners. So that one's fun for me. I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website. And I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description. And I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I'm looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them, and spreading the word more about my podcast. Happy Friday. So today's episode is the second part to the interview with me and Oscar. And again, he is a social ambassador for the NBLD project. He is one of the youngest ones, and he is from the UK. And I will include the link to his bio for the ambassador page so that you can read a little bit more about him if you want to. And I hope that you enjoy the interview with him. And if you don't know what an ambassador for the NBLD project is, basically what we do is we write blogs for the NBLD project, and we try to promote them, and we help raise money for them, and we try to help them by spreading more awareness about NLD, and helping them with, we don't do research for them, but that's what they do. And they try to have support groups for people with NLD and be able to help people who have NLD and help their families. So that's a little bit about the NBLD project and what it's like to be a project social ambassador for the NBLD project. So I hope you enjoy the interview, and I will talk to you next Friday. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's a matter of like finding my way around. And even when I got to my gate, I wasn't really relaxed. I just couldn't relax. And this happened. Even when I was on the plane, I wasn't really relaxed. But it was when I got to my hotel, I was like, okay, done, finished.
Right.
Like I'm there now. That's probably around, yeah. Or if I'm going to a new place to film, uh, I'll look it up and I'll just sort of plan out in my head. Like, okay, step one, get to this place first. And that's how I'll usually go about my travel.
Yeah, I can relate to traveling on your own too, because I've done that before. And I remember I was a little nervous about navigating the airport by myself too. And like you, I didn't completely relax until I got to the destination by myself. That was when I was studying abroad in Norway, and it it was a little challenging because of it being a different country, but it was easier because I had somebody picking me up from the airport and getting me to my hotel. So that made it easier.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like NLD is a burden, or uh, like it's the heavy weight to have?
Uh, I think it's, I don't think so. I think, I would say it's heavy in terms of, I guess, going through life. It's kind of heavy
Mm-hmm.
to have, right? Because, you know, in that aspect, it is. I think especially when someone's explaining it to me, if someone's explaining something to me, and as they're explaining to me, I know I'm gonna have to kind of re-clarify it with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it becomes like, oh, this is so embarrassing. Like it's such a
Yeah.
simple thing. Like how am I not getting this? That would probably be like the only time.
Yeah, I would agree with you with that. Like for me, one thing I'm trying to do with my finances is like have a spreadsheet of the categories I spend money in
Okay.
and like make sure that it adds up to what I think I spent.
Yeah.
Um, and like when it doesn't add up right, I'm like, okay, how am I doing this wrong?
Yeah.
um, so
Math.
yeah, math, yeah, yeah, or I just didn't track something right. So usually I try to do that with my mom or my brother because they can see something I'm not going to see, and they can try to describe it to me and help me understand it. And like you, sometimes I have to, often I have to clarify it and be like, I'm not sure I get that part.
Yeah, there you go.
um, what would you want to tell other people who have NLD or a learning challenge as motivation for them when they get discouraged about something?
Uh, I would say, um, like you know what, my therapist always, because I see him every now and again, and
Mm-hmm.
he always used to say to me like, in a joking way, but it's true. He said to me, "Is the ground gonna swallow you up and spit you out? Is the world ending?" No, I would probably sort of, I would say probably think of like along those lines in terms of,
Right.
you know, let's say you, I'm gonna use an example. Let's say you made a small mistake, right? Like you and I have been
Mm-hmm.
talking about. It's a small mistake. Is it easy to move past? No,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end of the day, and this is kind of rich coming from me, considering that I've been beating myself up all week with small mistakes this week. Um, but like, you'll be okay.
Right.
It's not going to define you. It's not going to, you know, if someone does like sort of define you by that, that's kind of their problem. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Um, but I would just say like also like focus on the positives. Like
Mm-hmm.
anything I've learned is like focus on what's going well in life. And again, that's coming from me who always focuses on the negatives, but that's fine. Focus on the positives and just sort of what's going well. Because whenever I've been forced to sit down and do that, there's always been more positives than there have been negatives.
Yeah, I agree with you on focusing on the positive and like you were saying, try to remind yourself that you're going to be okay when you make a mistake. And it can be hard to focus on the positive when you tend to focus on the negative. I do that too sometimes. And it's like, but like I said earlier, it doesn't usually help when you focus on the negative. It just makes it worse.
Yeah,
Um, so, but there is that balance of like, well, yeah, it makes it worse, but I want to learn from it a little
yeah.
bit, right? So it's you got to think about it a little bit at least. Um, so just a couple more questions. What would you tell people who they don't know that they have a learning challenge, but they think that they might, you know, how would you encourage them to find out?
Um, I would say, I mean, it's hard because like if for me, like I didn't know I had one until like it was, you know, so. But if you think you might have one, I would say try and get yourself diagnosed if you can.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't. I know it sounds like a scary thing, but it will end up helping you in the long run.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, um, hypothetically speaking, if I refused the help that my mum and the school gave me, I might not have, I don't know if something like my maths would have progressed
Mm-hmm.
as as okay as it had. So that'd be my advice. Go try and get yourself diagnosed, and it can only help you. It can't hurt. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. It like you said, it won't hurt. It will be able to help you know more about yourself and how to understand yourself more and be able to help yourself if you can in some ways, and like also help others with them interacting with you, because if you're able to interact with them more easily, then they will be able to also.
Yep.
um and I mean, it can feel a little scary to get diagnosed, like you were saying, but it, it can be tricky to do the process, but it definitely does help. um Also, do you know for yourself what is one of the things you're very proud of accomplishing?
Uh, I think, I mean, there are two that come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
The first one was, so in college, when I was in college here in 2019. So in my last 2 years, I studied film and TV, and in my last year, we had this thing called an FMP, a final major project.
Mm-hmm.
So you can work in a group, alone. It can be your own topic, whatever film you want to create, you can do it as long as it wasn't something
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. So I already made a film about NVLD. I was like, you know what, this is great. I'll make another one.
Mm,
And I worked alone, which is something I just didn't like working. I didn't like working in groups, so I worked alone. And I got my doctor involved. The doctor that diagnosed me, I got him involved. And when I finished that, I still watch it back to this day, and it's one, it's one of those videos I'm really proud of, because it came full circle in terms of the doctor that diagnosed me, and then that the final scene, spoiler alert, the final scene is him and I in the same room together, and like that was
mm,
my vision, and I was really happy with it, because I had some other people tell me try and do it differently. I was like, no, this final scene has to be him and I.
mm-hmm.
So I was really happy with that. The second one, I think, is moving out.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
Especially, number one, it was in the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and number two, moving out with NVLD, you know, knowing what you have to do, and I think I've settled in quite well. I mean, if anything, it feels weird to go back home now, to be honest. So, so, um, so I think those are those two, and I'm bound to leave something out, but like obviously, like work, I'm proud of, and stuff like that. There's a whole list of things, but I don't want to ramble. So,
Yeah. um yeah, for me, I was definitely proud of graduating from college with NLB, and being able to do it from a school like Berkeley, because it's hard to get into Berkeley, and it's not easy to graduate from it either.
yeah,
um, and being able to be the first woman in my family to graduate from college was also pretty cool. And being able to be like, yeah, not only did I do that, but I did it with NLD.
there you go.
Um, and you know, even though I haven't moved out with my parents yet, I'm working towards it, and being able to like accomplish different goals of like, saving for a security deposit so I can have that for rent, or saving for retirement, or different goals like that, makes me feel good, because it's moving towards independency,
Yeah,
and being able to be closer. And I think I'll probably be able to do it in a year or two. um the last thing I'm working towards is getting a new car, because the one I've had for a few years now. um and it would be easier for me to drive if it was newer and a little bit safer in terms of technology that I had,
yeah.
because I don't have a backup camera.
Okay, fair enough.
And like, it'd be just easier for me to see everything around me if I had more technology in it. um so I don't know if you have any questions for me about the podcast or about other things.
What was your how did the podcast come about? Was it just because you had an NVLD and you wanted to share, and then how did the podcast come about?
Yeah, so that was definitely part of it. I wanted to share more about having NLD with people, and I wanted to give a voice to people who have NLD and be able
Mm.
to help them feel not so alone, because I know that, even though there are other people who have learning challenges, they're not all the same. Um, and being able to have more information out there about NLD as well so that it can be understood better. And and just, you know, helping spread more awareness about it too, because I feel like whenever I tell somebody about it who I haven't told before, they're like, huh?
Thankfully, I did as well.
Yeah. Um, like they don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, okay, how do I tell them about it without them thinking I'm making it up, you know?
I think for me, it's always just people like judging me, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I can relate to that.
because like you don't know how people are going to react. Thankfully, I don't. I mean, okay. So on the film, on my first NVLD film I made,
Hmm.
someone said to me, someone commented on the video. They said it's not even a real diagnosis. And now, and that, yeah, I know. And like it kind of got me down a bit
Yeah.
because like I never got like a negative comment like that.
Hmm.
So even though in my mind I knew like it was a silly comment, it was almost like a punch in the stomach.
Yeah.
And like I didn't really know. I mean, I blocked him, but I was like, that's a bit mad that someone would
Hmm.
comment that sort of thing.
Yeah, I can definitely empathize with that, where like they might not think it's real because it's not on the DSM,
Yeah.
and like it like and like if they haven't heard that much about it, then they might not know all the research behind it and be able to be like, oh, yeah, it does exist.
Oh, actually, know what I did? So I replied back to him
Hmm.
saying it does exist, and I sent. I think I sent him a link to the NVLD project, and
Oh, good.
he never replied.
Uh, he, I don't know how he felt after that, but maybe he was like, oh, oops.
Exactly.
Like,
I'm hoping that's what happened.
yeah, hopefully, because you proved him wrong, and
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, it does exist. Like, here's a organization that helps with it. Um,
I would have loved if he came back and said it's not real. I would if he responded back to that one.
yeah, that would have been interesting to see. Um, and like, for me, uh, also like if they, one challenge is like autism and other learning challenges is because somebody somebody with NLD or with autism can could appear to be so normal in quotes
Yeah, yeah.
and be like, oh, then like, well, what is challenging for you, sort of thing, like, because if it being invisible, then it makes it even harder to understand and be able to describe it.
I don't know. That's a good point. I don't know if you ever get this, but I think whenever I tell people, they're always quite surprised that
Hmm.
I've got a learning difficulty because on the outside you kind of wouldn't know. I remember
Right.
telling one of my colleagues years ago, who I'm still friends with to this day, and she was amazed because look, unless I think that's one of not I don't want to say it's a problem, but I think that's one of the things with NVLD. It's hidden, right? So
Hmm.
people aren't necessarily going to know unless they give you like a math question, then they might pick up on something. But
Right. Yeah.
other than that, it's hidden. That's kind of
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that, where like for me, I've had some people surprised about it too when I've shared it with them, and um like they, like, for you, it you wouldn't really know that I have it unless you, like you said, you give me a math problem or you give me something really difficult like that.
Yeah.
And like be able to pick up on it that way. Or like for me, sometimes I'm clumsy. Like if you saw me being clumsy, maybe you would pick up on it. And maybe you wouldn't. But yeah, that's definitely a good point. Um, Anything else you want to mention before we wrap it up?
Um, no, I think that's it. I think I've covered my story.
Okay. Thank you for letting me interview you and being able to ask you some questions about NLD and what it's like for you to have it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also, see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than originally it was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.